without any delay, let's get started. Agenda. The agenda of the topic is here. We will cover all the points that are mentioned here, mainly on what is threat modeling, why is threat modeling, how to implement threat modeling, when should we use threat modeling methodologies, and mainly we will focus on STRIDE, uh, and we'll conclude the presentation. You might be wondering why there is a car. We will talk this in the next slide. What is threat modeling? Threat modeling basically refers to a document or a design model of a system or application or resource from security point of view, lists potential threats and action to mitigate each threat. Also, validating the threats and verification of action taken. In order to be very clear with the above statements, we have to know few terminologies like resource. A resource is a valuable asset or a capability that needs to be protected, such as sensitive data, for example, like confidential information, personal information, or financial information. Critical system and infrastructure information, for example, information related to operation technologies or communication networks. Or it can be intellectual property, for example, like patents, design patterns, or it can be a trade secrets or proprietary information. Sometimes it can be referred to a physical assets like equipment, materials, etc. In few cases, it can also be referring to human resources such as employees, contractors, customers. And next one is the vulnerability. Uh, Vulnerabilities or weakness or a gap in security measure that can be exploited by threats to gain unauthorized access or dispute operation or comparison to the resources. Vulnerabilities can exist in technology, process, people, or physical environment. Threat, threats are the potential events or actions that can cause harm to a system or an application. Example, unauthorized access. Something called as a risk, which is potential for a threat to occur and the impact it would have on an organization or individual. Once you are clear with the terminologies, um, it will be easy to understand. To make it much more simpler, I have come up with a diagrammatic approach where we can say like assume that we have an asset and it can be having a vulnerability or spotted weakness, and uh, what potentially can impact, it's basically called as a threat, and it can be diagrammatically represented in this way. So the combination between the interjection, the middle part, is basically is called as a risk, to make it very clear. And the other interjection, that between assert and threat, we have something called as a weakness, and the other intersection between vulnerability and threat is called as a likelihood or the frequency of happening, and the other intersection that we have is basically between assert and vulnerability is an exploitation of it. So I hope now it is still clear. To explain this terminologies, if I take asset as a car, if it is not locked, the risk or the probability of stealing the car is very high. Stealing a car is a threat. Easiest mitigation is just to lock the car. And the other example again with a car that I want to give is, if you park a car outside the house, not in a garage, the risk associated to it is very less when compared to the first one. So I believe now assert, vulnerability, threat, risk mitigation are very clear with respect to this example. So why is threat modeling important? The benefits of threat modeling is basically is to improve the security posture and reduce risk. Take an informed decision making about security control and investments, and efficient use of security resources and budgeting, compliances with the industry standards and regulations. Finally, it will increase stakeholders' confidence in the security of a particular system and application. When to use a threat? If you ask me, though, I'll say it as soon as as early as possible, or sooner the better. Ideally, it should happen at a design phase. We all understand the requirements is always evolving, and hence it is an ideal to, whenever there is a change in the system, look into the thread model and accommodate the change. In the worst case scenario, it's basically when you get an incident, then you have to look into the thread model. How to implement the thread model? So there are four basic questions that one have to be asking in terms of implementing the thread model, and these are four simple and easy questions. What are we building on? Of course, we are here to build a good software, and what can go wrong in that software? The purpose of building a software, let us say you are trying to build a software for an insurance company to sell the quotes or buy the quotes. What can go wrong in that? Who are the users? How the users are being authenticated? So those are the questions that you can think on, and what can go wrong, and what are we going to do about it better? Are we going to take the authorization and authentication part of the application done completely by ourselves, or are we trying to take an external identity provider and uh, delegate it? And moving on, and what did we do to make it good enough? Is the four These are the four questions that can be asked to make the thread model better. Approaches. First one is asset centric, second one is attacker centric, and third one is a developer centric. Today we'll be discussing more on developer centric, where it will be talking more related to the STRIDE. STRIDE is an acronym which stands for S for spoofing, T for tampering, R for repudiation, I for information disclosure, D for denial of service, and finally E for elevation of privileges. It's a structured approach to identify different types of threats. So in terms of spoofing, spoofing is related to authenticity, tampering is related to integrity, reputation is related to non-repudiability, information disclosure means confidentiality, denial of service opposite is availability, and elevation privileges is related to authorization. So if you see like an example like spoofing, again you can remember that car example. A car can be, if a theft, if someone tries to pretend someone else by impersonating and get the keys, so it's basically the spoofing. And tampering, this is when someone changes something without the permission, like a bad person tries to change how your car works. So, and next one is repudiation. This is something when you happen when someone denies doing something, like if a bad person drives your car and then he says like he didn't do it. So information disclosure, this is when someone shares the information that they should not share. Like if a bad person tells others that you put your car keys in a particular place. uh, One is a denial of service. This is when someone stops you from using something else, like blocking the way uh, to use the car so that you can't drive it. So, and last one in the list is elevation of privileges. This is when someone gains more control than they should. Like if a bad person hacks your car and can control it even through they are not supposed to do. For example, the best example I can give this is valet parking. Valet parking comes with the uh, limited access, but instead of that, if they have given the full keys, then they can take away your car. Or so I hope it is clear. Moving on to the next one. In terms of a stride, the elements of strides basically has a process, a data flow, trust boundaries, data store, and external entities. How those are being defined in terms of a diagram? If you see it, the rectangular box is known as an external entity, or it And the double circles is a complex process. Process is always a single circle, and the data stores is indicated by double line, and the data flow between the systems is indicated with an arrow, and boundaries are indicated with the dotted lines. So the tool that we use in terms of designing threat model is Threat Dragon. Conclusion. Threat modeling is a crucial process in development and deployment of secure systems and applications. By proactively identifying and addressing security risk, organizations can improve their overall security posture and protect their valuable assets. Integrating threat model into development lifecycle can help and ensures security is built in from start rather than adding it uh, after through. Thank you.